Hello, everyone. I wanted to welcome you to Alberta Recreation and Park Association's 2020-2020 ARPA Conference and Energize Workshop. As you can see, we are virtual this year, and so I welcome you to this new platform. You are joining us today for the session, What do we know about intergenerational trauma? Just to make sure that you know where you are right now. And we welcome you for this amazing discussion today. My name is Janet Naklia. I'm a programs manager with ARPA. And I wanted to start this session in a good way by doing what many of our elders have taught us to do, and that is to acknowledge the land that we're on. So I'm currently sitting here in Calgary, which is called Lokensis in the Blackfoot language, of whose traditional territory this is. And I wanted to acknowledge this land a lot in honor of the conversation we're having today, because I'm sure in many ways the disconnect from the land, the disconnect from that spirit that goes hand in hand with the land, has a lot to do with trauma, with many people, many nations here in Canada, but also around the world. So I wanted to give a deep acknowledgement to the land that I'm on today. So I have the great honor of introducing Elder Kerrie Moore, who will be doing our session with us today. We have worked with Kerrie in many different ways. She's been a big part of our culture camp that we have done in the past, and part of an international elder circle that we're also working on that you'll hear about at the conference today. And it is really, truly an honor to have someone like Elder Kerrie who is able to walk in two different kind of worlds and bring them together in a beautiful way. So not only is she a Cree and Metis Elder, who's done a lot of work across Calgary and across the province and other provinces actually in cultural ways, but she also has a master's degree in social work and is a trained psychotherapist with her own practice. So she'll be able to talk to us about issues of post-traumatic stress and trauma and various ways that impacts our life on different levels. So I would like to, and on the note of trauma and acknowledging our past, I would also point out that I'm wearing my orange shirt in honor of Orange Shirt Day that's happening on September 30th. And if you don't know about that, my challenge to you then is to educate yourself and find out what that is. So I'll now pass it over to Elder Kerrie Moore with this offering of tobacco. So we honor our elders like Elder Kerrie with the offering of tobacco, and we will then, so we can continue in a good way, and that you can bring home these learnings, teachings to yourself and to your family and to your community, so that we could all work together and move forward in a good way. So with that, Elder Kerrie, I'd like to pass it over to you.
Thank you very much, Janet. I'm very honored to be here. I'm very honored to speak with everyone that's listening. And I would like to begin that way by saying, Nitana ko muksanaki, wapan mahiga nagakasqueo. My name is Kerrie Moore, and I was gifted with a Blackfoot name here in this Treaty 7 territory. But my territory is Treaty 6, and Treaty 6 is a very large territory that extends into Saskatchewan and Alberta. So I'm very honored to be here. I'm very honored to be able to impart my teachings to all of you. And I thank you very much for welcoming me in such a wonderful way, Janet. I want to begin with smudge, as we do all of our ceremonies, all of our meetings, all of our teachings every day. And we begin with smudge because smudge is a cultural way, our cultural way of letting go of what is really bothering us and settling in and coming down into spirit and being able to speak from our spirit, not from our head. And all nations have their own medicines that they use for smudging. All nations have their own way of doing that. Sometimes it's through prayer. Sometimes it's through mindfulness. There are many different ways where we can come down into our spirit. So before I begin, let me just tell you this, that our spirit is not a religious thing. Our spirit is part of the human body. In fact, it's part of all things. All things have spirit. and we carry our spirit deep within us in our belly button, where we're attached to our mothers. And my grandmother used to say, you're attached to your mother in your belly button because that's where Creator wants you to think, not up here. And we know that our head will play tricks on us. We know that our heart will play tricks on us. But we know that when we're in our spirit, we are in control. So today I am using sage. I always have the sweetgrass near me because in this territory, we primarily use sage and sweetgrass. We use tobacco, and I'm very grateful that Janet offered me that tobacco, and I'll speak to you about that. And we use cedar as well in our ceremonies and many other medicines. But depending on where you come from, you use the medicines from that territory, that medicine that grows in your territory, and it's different everywhere we go. So let me tell you this story, which is my grandmother's story. It is really told with a combination of ways, and that's why I love it, because she came from a very Christian background because of what happened to her in her life, and she came from a very traditional background because of who she was. And so when she tells this story, you will hear both sides, and I love it because it really helps all of us realize that we're all human beings. We all have the same feelings. We all have trauma affects all of us exactly the same way. So let me begin in this way to let you know why we are so connected to Mother Earth, because Mother Earth is related to us. She's our mother. Mother Earth is just as important to us as our own mothers. She's not different. She is just as important to us. She cares for us just like our mother does. And all of the plants and animals around her provide us with beautiful medicines and help. So long ago, Creator created the universe, the sun and the moon and the stars, the water, the plants, the trees, all of those spaces between those planets, all of the things in the world, Creator created. And He gave all of those things spirit, the ability to be in that place where they are in their values of kindness and love and respect and honesty and accountability and responsibility and compassion and courage and all of the other values that we carry deep within us. And Creator placed that spirit deep in the middle of our body, deep in the middle of all things. That's where we have our spirit. And all things in the universe, all those species, were given gifts. And those gifts are all unique. Those gifts are all important. And every gift is just as important as the next. And all those things in the universe provide support to each other. They create relationships with each other. They protect each other. They offer their kindness to each other. They create a balance in the world. They all work together, and they work with us as well. And one of the little plants in that circle was the tobacco plant. And the little tobacco plant said to Creator, I will give myself to the two-leggeds so they can pray with me, so they can offer kindness to each other, so I will know what they want. And all the other plants and the animals, everything in the universe will know when the two-leggeds offer tobacco, they're offering kindness and asking us for help. And I will offer that help. I will provide that reciprocity to them because they are showing respect to me. And so I thank you, Janet, for that tobacco, because when you offer me tobacco, you are asking for me to tell this story, and you're doing it in a very respectful way so that the meaning of that story will be taken in a good way. And so I am offering it to all of you. Thank you for that. So Creator then said to all of the plants and the animals, I'm going to bring another species here to this earth. They will be the human beings. And the human beings will carry all the values deep within them, in their spirit. And that is who they are. The human beings are love and kindness, respect and honesty, accountability and responsibility. But they will forget who they are from time to time. And when they forget who they are, they will come to you on the earth, Mother Earth, and to the stars, and they will ask for your help to help guide them back into their spirit, where they carry all of those beautiful values. All of you will be there to help them, because you will never forget who you are. The human beings are the only species on earth that forget who they are from time to time. That is why we begin every day with smudge. When we offer that tobacco to those medicines, when we pick them, that little plant looks at me and says, thank you. Yes, I will help you. And I will help all of the human beings. And when we bring that beautiful sage and sweetgrass, which we use here in this territory, those are the plants that we use primarily when we want to smudge. And so I'm going to light it today because I picked this sage in the right way. And she knows that we need help every day. We need to be reminded about how beautiful we are. We need to be reminded about our courage and our strength, and that we are here for a reason, just like everyone else. So I ask that you reach in and take this beautiful smoke, because this smoke is the spirit of this plant. She's looking for you, you see? And we do this. We smudge ourselves because we're getting rid of everything that is not of value to us today. So we start in our spirit. Take that breath. Take that breath, come down into your spirit. And when you come down into your spirit, now you know who you are. That beautiful, loving, kind, honest, respectful, accountable human being. Now you know who you are. And when we smudge together and we take that breath into our spirit, what you will see when you are trying to learn something or teach something or share something, everybody who is in their spirit will take that in a kind way, and you won't see the behaviors. So take another breath. And I'm just going to offer this blessing because I know that this is being taped. And I just want to say to you, think about something good today that you want to give yourself and others. And let go of those things that are not values, so that you can have a good day today. And so can your family, and so can this world. Because when we use our values in this world, we make this world a better place. So I thank you for that. So let me begin by talking about what is intergenerational trauma? What does that look like to you and to us? First, let me say that we don't need to separate trauma into little cubby holes, because all things on earth react to trauma in exactly the same way as human beings. We're part of Mother Earth. Remember that. That was a gift Creator gave us too. So we have the ability to react to danger and fear. We never lose that ability. Even the plants and the animals react to danger. And we react to it in a way called fight, flee, and freeze. It's in our survivor brain. So we have this little reticular activation system that is right at the back of our head, which connects our body to our head. And as soon as we see something frightening, all of a sudden we get a reaction in our midbrain, which is the limbic system. This is where we carry those behaviors of fight, flee, and freeze. And we don't have to worry. No matter what is happening in the world, we will always always react with fight, flee, or freeze. It is our natural survival brain, and it's found in the midbrain. So even the plants and animals, and we know that when they're in fear, right? We know that there are certain plants that turn their leaves when a storm is coming so that they don't lose their fruit, right? We know that animals will attack you if they think they're afraid of you. And we react the same way. And the behaviors that are attached to the survivor brain are fight, flee, freeze, anger, anxiety, or depression. And we usually adopt one of those behaviors more than the others. We might use all of them at some point in our life, but there's one behavior that we tend to adopt early in our trauma as children, and that will be the one that we're going to use most often when our brain thinks we are in danger. So you will see bullies, that's the anger. You will see people that get anxiety and they don't want to leave their houses, that's the anxiety. You will see people that get sad or depressed and they lose their hope. And those behaviors are not normal unless you're in danger. So let's talk about something very important. We're all human beings. We know we react to trauma in exactly the same way. We've all been colonized. So no matter where you come from, even if you haven't been colonized or even if you haven't experienced any kind of trauma in this lifetime, your ancestors probably did. In fact, I don't know of any place where people didn't experience some sort of trauma in their lives. Maybe because we've all had wars, we've all had refugee camps, we've had many, many different things. Indigenous people had residential schools where they were taken literally from their families. So all people in the world have experienced colonization. And I can't speak to colonization on a broad spectrum because there are too many things about colonization that would need to be said. I can speak to it though, from a healing perspective. So let's think about who Indigenous people are. Indigenous people know all about that connection to Mother Earth. They lived with harmony and balance in their communities. They prayed every day. They offered gratitude or thanks when they offered something to Mother Earth. The tobacco we used is not the tobacco you see today. It was a wild kinnikinnick is what we used. And everything around us, we treated with as much kindness and respect as we could. When visitors came to the territory in a peaceful way, we welcomed them in. We fed them, even if we had very little food. We still do that today. We kept them warm. We even sent scouts with them to find the trail to where they were going. When we hunted, we put that tobacco down and we only would hunt that animal. We wouldn't just discriminate. My father, who was a great hunter, would pick one animal and he would may have to follow that animal for days. And he would pray and ask that animal to feed his family. And he treated everything with respect and kindness. And it was such an amazing gift when you saw those hunters bring back that meat, because that meat was shared with the entire community. When people were having difficulties, we had ceremonies. Every day we had ceremonies. We would start with the sun rising and paint our faces and say, thank you for another day. So our lives were filled with gratitude, challenges as well, tremendous challenges. But we were there to support one another. We were there to respect one another. And we did that with our ceremonies. And everything we use in our ceremonies comes from the earth. Because remember, the earth doesn't forget who she is. So when we need that help, we would bring those medicines to us. We would have lodges that were built with red willows and hides. We would have that fire in the center. We would bring those grandfathers into the lodges, which are the rocks that you would call rocks, because the mountains and the rocks are the first people. They were here before all of us. And we treated the world with respect. Did we have war? Yes. Did we struggle? Yes. But when we're in danger, we knew how to fight, flee, and freeze. That's when that would come up, right? And we're human beings. Sometimes we forget who we are. Remember that. So, Indigenous people everywhere in the world had ceremonies, honored Mother Earth in exactly the way I'm speaking to you. Although it may have looked different, the environment, the medicines, the songs, it may have looked different. We still did the same thing. We had the same protocols. We still do today. The wonderful thing about Indigenous people is that we're still really close to Mother Earth. We still have those really deep memories of our songs and of our ceremonies, even if we weren't taught them in the last few generations. We still remember it. When we're sitting in lodges, we remember it. So when we're working with Indigenous people, one of the few things we know that creates resilience is a strong cultural identity. And we had pride in who we were. If we were having difficulties, struggling with our own behaviors or someone else's behaviors, the community came together and did ceremony to try to support you. So Indigenous people knew how to parent their children with love and kindness. They didn't say to them, "You're a bad girl." They would say, "What happened to make you so angry?" So we were taught how to parent our children. Those little babies were brought into those women's lodges in the very beginning, and they were cared for and loved. We would see the gifts from a very early age, and we would encourage those gifts. But we didn't tell them, "This is who you're going to be." That child told us who they were going to be. So Indigenous people had a great understanding of Mother Earth, and in the process knew how to protect and care for Mother Earth. So what did it look like before colonization came to Canada, which is really only a few hundred years in comparison to many other people who've been colonized for hundreds and hundreds of years? We do know from a science called epigenetics, and we could have told you this a long time ago as Indigenous people, because you will hear elders tell you, be careful what you do today, because it will affect the next 7 generations. And how true that is. We know from the science of epigenetics that not just genetics are passed down to us, the color of our hair and our eyes, but so are the memories and behaviors of our ancestors. So if you didn't attend residential school in this generation, or if you haven't dealt with a war or a major trauma in your generation, if your parents did, if their grandparents did, if their grandparents did, back to 7 generations, a lot of the trauma that they experienced at that time could have been passed down to you. And we know that. That's why sometimes people will say, "I don't know why I'm so angry. I have this impulsive anger. I get angry at the slightest little thing. I shouldn't get angry if somebody says, 'No, I can't do that.'" Because fight, flee, freeze, the survivor brain has given to all of us. But we should only be angry, anxious, or depressed when we're in danger. So I'll get Janet to show the first slide of who Indigenous people were before colonization. I'm referring to all of you as well. Remember that? Because when I refer to all of you, you've all been colonized too, right? So just click it again. Click it to the second slide, actually. This is go to the next slide if you wouldn't mind, Jenna. Yeah, okay. So when we are raised in a loving environment where our parenting skills have been taught to us and passed down to us. So remember this, when I talked about epigenetics, our parenting skills are passed down to us generation to generation too. So our brains only know what our brains know. The brain isn't going to change you. You have to change your brain. So if you have a repetitive pattern of being raised in a certain way, you will probably adopt those patterns and raise your own children in that way. So what does it look like before colonization for an Indigenous person? We have strong kinship ties because everybody would raise that child. We had complete safety in our community. We knew we were protected. We had positive, loving communication. As I spoke before, people didn't say, "You're bad." Somebody would say, "What happened to make you so angry?" And they would have held you as that child, and they would have taught you how to behave. They wouldn't try to tell you you need to behave differently. They would show you because of their kindness and their love to you. And we would have begun at a very early age. When that baby is born, there is a ceremony provided to that baby and to all the people around that baby. And ceremony and that spiritual connection that we had to everyone in our community, as well as Mother Earth, would have been learned in the very beginning. If we needed support, we would go to the earth to bring those medicines back, to help those people, to help ourselves. And so when we think of children from 0 to the age of 3, that is when our brain grows the fastest. Everything you learn, you just create new neurons in your brain and you're like, wow, right? So we know that the brain grows very quickly from the ages of 0 to 3. That's when we want to teach children as much as we can about culture, about safety, about love and kindness, about working together, about Mother Earth, all of those things in the world. If you are raised with all of that love and kindness, you grow into a child, and now you have a sense of worth. You know who you are. You have a sense of who you are and self-esteem, but the important thing is you have pride, because you don't have a strong cultural identity without pride. But you see the people around you, and you have such pride in there. They teach you how important you are. And you have self-respect for yourself. You know that what you do changes everything around you. So you are responsible for your thoughts, your words, and your actions. You're already learning that as a little child. And if you have all of those things without trauma, I'm not talking about one-time trauma, because there are always challenges, but we get through them, usually with the people around us, right? I'm talking about repetitive challenges that create trauma, okay? So if without that trauma, you grow into an adolescent, which is a really difficult time, because that's when the brain takes another jump. It becomes very impulsive, and the reward system becomes very strong. It's important that adolescent has already got those ways of coping with life before they get to that point. Because if they are raised in that way, they now are developing a sense of accountability and responsibility. They now know that they can make choices. They have a consciousness about, if I do this, this is what will happen. If they are still in that place of nurturing and support and safety, they will grow into adults with a strong self-concept of who they are. They will have a very strong cultural identity. They will be independent, not dependent, independent. And they will live a really balanced life. And at this point in time, they now go forward because throughout the entire time of their life, they are going from being very, very dependent, and that's why we care for them so deeply, to going into an independent place. I can live on my own. I know how to treat the earth. I know how I treat other people. They become interdependent at that point. They know how to live with people and by themselves. So this is who we are before colonization. So when we talk about intergenerational trauma, it looks very different for Indigenous people, because when you think about who you are coming from other places, maybe with your own trauma that's been passed down to you, you came here for a better life for many reasons. Indigenous people had their land taken from them. They had their culture taken from them. It was outlawed, actually. They had their families taken from them. They had their language taken from them. They had their natural ways of living on the earth and hunting taken from them. And when you have all of that taken from you, you don't know who you are anymore. And people will tell you who you are. So the difference between intergenerational trauma and other trauma is that in intergenerational trauma, we had everything taken from us. People who come here as immigrants and refugees, as settlers, they came with their languages. They came with their ability to buy land or to have land. They came with their culture. They came with their ways of knowing, their songs, their musical instruments. They came with their own leaders. They came with their own cultural leaders. They were able to build their homes. They were able to build their places to go to have their culture reinforced. So the difference between other people and intergenerational trauma is that intergenerational trauma, we have everything taken from us. And that's why we're trying to bring it back. That is why culture is so important to us. That is why language is so important to us. That is why Mother Earth is so important to us. That is why our songs are so important to us. We need all of those things to bring back what was taken from us. So it's not even a matter of decolonization, because that's a really tough thing to do. We know that we still have the memories of those ceremonies and that music and the plants and the animals. And so it's there within us. And all we have to do is go to ceremony and learn it again to have us remember it. So I call it repossessing what is already there, because we still have the memories of all of those things. So we are here trying to help Indigenous people reconnect to who they are and to Mother Earth. Because when you connect to Mother Earth and build that relationship between all things and know how to get into spirit, then what we have is that balance in the world of love and kindness and respect and honesty, accountability and responsibility. We won't have that anger, anxiety, and depression because we know who we are. So you have to know who you are. You have to know how to connect to who you are. And many people figure that out on their own. And many of you know how to do that. Maybe you do yoga. Maybe you do horseback riding. Maybe you listen to music. Whatever you do that gets you down into the middle part of your body, to your spirit, you will now remember who you are. And what happens is you get out of your midbrain and you drop into the prefrontal cortex, which is where we think and solve problems. So what happens when you in brain? because something might happen to you once and you're able to work through it. But what happens when you have that repetitive trauma? Like Indigenous children who were taken to residential school, for example. They were taken away from everything they knew. They go into trauma and fear because they don't trust anything. There's nothing safe, nothing familiar to them. So if I have the first slide, if you can get back to that now, Janet, I want to show you, when you're looking at the trauma model, the results of the trauma in your life. If you don't have those loving relationships, you have neglect and abuse instead, and criticism, you bad person. That's what I mean by that. You have spiritual deprivation. You no longer practice your culture. That little child, the cortisol levels come up in that little child. Cortisol is the hormone that gives us the ability to get up in the morning, move, do what we need to do. And then when we relax, the cortisol levels come down in our body. And we have to have the balance of the awake and the down for the cortisol to work effectively. If we are in trauma every day, the cortisol level comes up because you don't know what's happening around you, and it never goes down. And what happens is that the cortisol levels in your body become so toxic to you that you start to get sick in many ways. One is you can't get out of your brain anymore. You stay perpetually in your limbic system, the midbrain, fight, flee, freeze, because you've had such a repetitive pattern over time of trauma that your brain thinks you are in danger at all times. So even when you're 65 years old, when you walk into an environment that's new to you, you will perceive it as dangerous, and your brain will say, where do I go? Do I run? I need to create safety. Excuse me. So what happens is you see people that have unresolved trauma throughout their lives because they don't know what I'm telling you. They don't know that trauma happened because it was passed down to them epigenetically, or maybe they have trauma in this life too, because maybe somebody in their past didn't know how to parent, didn't know how to love. One of the things I hear a lot from Indigenous people is, my mother never ever told me she loved me. I knew she did, but she never told me she loved me, because at residential school you weren't allowed to tell people you loved them. I was the same. My father never said I love you, but I knew he loved me deeply. So there are lots of behaviors you see that are passed down to you. Maybe you had a lot of coping methods as well in your life, right? Where do coping methods come from, like addictions? They come because it is the easiest way to forget what happened to you. You can't be so upset about people out there. What's the matter with them, right? We have to recognize that when you feel so terrible because of the abuse you've experienced all of your life, it changes you. You are stuck in that midbrain. You don't trust anybody. You don't feel safe. Your cortisol levels have never come down. So you can't get out of your midbrain. So what happens, especially to children who are now going to school? They're trying to learn, or you're trying to take them in and you're trying to help them. Right? This is what they look like, right? Or they've blocked themselves. They go into a frozen state. They don't hear what you're saying, right? Fight, flee, or freeze, remember, okay? And what happens when you've got a repetitive trauma in your life as a child, maybe you don't have it anymore, all it takes in your brain is less than a second for your brain to take that experience in a short-term memory, less than 1 second, a negative experience will become in your long-term memory. So all your brain knows when you're looking for, how do I deal with this, is fight, flee, freeze, because your brain pattern has had this repetitive negative behavior for a period of time. And so your brain is stuck. You can't get into your prefrontal cortex. Your prefrontal cortex is how you think, how you solve problems, how you learn complicated math equations, how you learn to read. That all comes from the prefrontal cortex. This is a working memory. This is how we create social connections, because if you don't trust people, how do you connect with them? So literally, this part of your brain is how we learn. And when you're in your midbrain and you've never learned anything else around you, oh, maybe you've had people that are really nice to you, and that's the way we usually are trying to be. But if you don't have a repetitive, new, positive experience, it's not going to change your brain. This is how important this is. We live in a world that we offer programs once a week, or we offer counseling once a week, or we offer a camp once a year. Those are all very, very, very important, because you see things change with those children and those adults who they come to you like this, and by the end they're like this, right? They actually have come down into spirit, and they come into their prefrontal cortex. So now when the elders are smudging and bringing them into that place, they can hear, they can remember, and they can put that into a long-term pattern. It takes 12 seconds for positive experience to go into your long-term memory. So you have to do everything for 12 seconds. So praise people for 12 seconds. Do it for longer than that if you can. But it's not just a one-time thing. You certainly have to be able to see positive things in your life, or you're not going to figure out how do I get out of this, right? So what does your brain say when you have this negative, long-term negative experience? When you have all that neglect, as a child, if that's all you know, you're going to grow up with fear, blame, and shame. You're going to be in that midbrain. You're going to grow into an adolescent where now you're starting to make decisions, but you don't trust the world. You don't trust anybody. And you have no pride in where you're coming from, because people have made you feel that you are nothing. And you're going to have anger, apathy. What does it matter? Nobody cares about me anyway. You're going to lose your hope, and you will have no identity. You are going to look for people like you who can get you through. That's why this is a time where gangs become very much a part of our lives, because you meet somebody who says, I get it. I went through that. Now come on, I'll help you, right? Yes. I just want to be loved. I want to feel like I belong. And if you still have no help with that trauma, you're going to grow into an adult. And you might have attachment issues. You might have trauma. You might have huge loss issues. We don't separate. Intergenerational trauma to us is also grief and trauma, because we can't separate those two. We have lost everything, and the loss of other human beings becomes a huge issue with us as well. We fear, we don't know what to do, right? We go into that sadness. We get angry, right? We could have addictions, because addictions are a way of coping with our pain. We could have violence in our life because we were raised in an environment where there was a lot of domestic violence, and that's what we know. We become very dependent around us because we only know one thing. And that support that comes to us we really look to that support to help us in many ways. That's how important our programming is. Sometimes those programs are the only hope, the only peace, and the only way of changing our brain that we have. That's pretty scary, right? When you think of children that need our help so desperately, right? And we could also be in survivor brain for the rest of our life. So, so just to let you know that there is a way through all of this. There is a way for us to move forward in our lives. And if you can give me I think if you can go to the third slide, perhaps. So when you look at the protocol that we use when we're working with Indigenous people, we have to realize that culture has to be part of the program. If you're going to be working with Indigenous people, culture must be part of that because that's familiar to us. We still have those memories because of epigenetics. And I hear this all the time. Oh, you know, we have a smudge pot there at our group home and we leave it there and our kids are all Indigenous, but they don't want to use it. They don't care about their culture. That's not why at all. We have to realize that many of our Indigenous people have never had any culture. They've never had the safety of what it's like to be with healthy Indigenous people around them. They have never experienced a sweat lodge or a smudge. So of course they don't want to smudge. They don't know how to do it. They don't know what they're doing. So it is really imperative that we provide those elders and those knowledge keepers in all of our programs. Because when you have that repetitive, positive experience, you're going to see the brains change. They'll go from trauma into the prefrontal cortex, which is where we will configure things out. Remember that we always start with spirit first. You have to get people down here into their mid-belly, not here. That's how we are in trauma, right? And we do that through smudge. We do that through drumming. We do that through singing our songs. We do it through culture. You might find in your own life that you do it through walking, through mindfulness. But just a word of caution, because I know a lot of people are training on mindfulness now, and they are doing mindfulness with Indigenous people. That's fabulous, but mindfulness is very unfamiliar to many of us, and it would be very unsafe for us to close our eyes because we're up in our trauma brain, right? This is how you get, right? So we do spiritfulness. Spiritfulness is taking that breath, smudging, singing those songs, praying, and we come down into our spirit, and now we're safe. So in order to create safety, you must be in this place of your body. You can't begin this way. You have to begin this way. So you have to do whatever you have to do to get people into their spirit.
Kerrie?
Yes, are we getting to that time?
Full time check. Yeah.
Okay. Just another thing, just one thing I want to say, and that is emotion. In colonization, you have your spirit taken away from you and you have your emotions taken away from you. We are four-dimensional: spiritual, emotional, physical, and cognitive beings. Emotions are creators' antibiotics. We have to feel in order to heal. And if you've been told, don't cry, suck it up, you are doing a great service to yourself, because you have to say thank you. I have every right to be angry before you can get rid of it. Okay, so remember that we're going to do this together, and we must remember that culture is very important, and hopefully you understand how important smudging is and what that means, because you're going to be out there working with people from, this works for other cultures too. You need to know that. I have many people that come into our ceremonies that are coming from other countries, and they say to me, you know what? This is what we do in my country. So don't think that this Indigenous thing is just for the Indigenous people here. All of us are four-dimensional beings. All of us have spirit. And we need to use the cultural ways of what we know in our own cultures to help make us whole. So I thank you for that. And we will open it up for questions if there are any.
Thank you so much for that beautiful teaching, Kerrie, Elder Moore. So powerful and so beautiful and so kind. And I know often you say it's that kindness that will be the door to a lot of the reconciliation work that we move forward with. So yes, so now everyone, I hope you've taken note of your questions. What we'll do now is we're going to have a chance to have a one-on-one conversation with Elder Moore live. And so we now will open that up to questions. So I'd like to thank Kerrie again for this amazing teaching, but don't go away because we have a chat coming up right now. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Oh, not bye-bye. Stay. We're talking soon. Okay.